Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Bookham Nook Show. My name is Kyle Colley and this is a special episode of Author Talks Podcast, a podcast about hearing the behind the scenes stories, ideas, and writing journeys of authors. This episode is brought to you by Bookham, the book community's new and best way to host dynamic online book clubs. Download the app and start your book club today at www.bookhamapp.com. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. My guest today is the worldly Dr. Ariel Rosita King. Dr. King is a distinguished global expert in international affairs, business, and education. Dr. King is also the author of the book Humanity Unveiled. She is the founder of the Ariel Foundation International, a nonprofit organization with an international focus on children and youth leadership worldwide. She has lived an incredible human life. Dr. King, welcome to the Author Talks podcast.
Thank you so much. It's so wonderful being here with you. I've watched your shows many times, and I'm so grateful to actually be a guest.
I love to hear it, and thank you so much again for your time to come speak to us. Speaking of being worldly, let's start with language. You know 4 languages. I would be interested to hear how you learn them and what are some of your favorite non-English words?
Oh, wow, that's a very good question. So I'd say the first languages that I started with was French when I was a au pair in France, and you just learn little by little. And also when I was a stagiaire or an intern at the World Health Organization, the first time in Geneva, Switzerland, many people were speaking, of course, English, but other languages, and French was one of the major languages. So I just started to listen and learn little words, like many of us. Merci, thank you, bonjour, hello, d'accord, okay, chocolat, chocolate, some of the most important words. And then from there, just being around people speaking French, I learned French. But I think that the biggest experience I had was German, because I didn't know German, I didn't understand German. And I allowed myself to go to a small German town with 68 people, including myself. They call it a Dorf, which means, like, I don't know what it means, but I don't know any place that has 68 people, but there's town. And almost everybody's related to everyone except me and one other person. Nobody spoke French and nobody spoke English, but the people were very welcoming and very kind. It was one of my best experiences. So I'd love to write a book about it, because it was just an amazing experience. And I learned by listening. I learned by talking to children, children teaching me. And I learned just by hearing and speaking, almost imitating rather than taking classes. And it was the best way to learn German. And to this day, I can still speak German as a result of that.
Yeah, I love to hear that because I read this book by Quincy Jones called The 12 Notes, and he talks about that. He says the best way to learn language is everywhere you go, whatever country you go to, see if you can just pick up 4 or 5 words. If you go there a few times, you start to pick up the context of what people are saying, and it helps you to grow as a speaker. So in that sense, like how has language helped you develop as a global leader, humanitarian, and an ambassador?
What's really interesting is that what I didn't understand before I learned languages, and I'm not just talking about, being able to conjugate verbs, because I think that reading and writing is very different from speaking, because most people don't write something down and show a piece of paper. What they do is they try to communicate with each other. So what I've actually learned is that language is the key to culture. And language is the key to the understanding and the thinking of a particular country. Let me just give you one example. One example would be many people know c'est la vie. It's the life. That is life. C'est la vie. It's life, right? This is the way it is. Or in German, they talk about Kinder, which means children. You can be called Kinder if you are 60 years old. The only thing that matters is that you are younger than they are. So forever you will be Kinder. And that's really important to understand, because, in many cultures, as soon as you're 18 or 21, you're an adult. Nobody calls you a child. But in the German culture, as long as you are younger than they are and you have less experience than they do, you will always be Kinder. So it just depends on the culture. So the culture, a language allows you to understand a little more the culture. In Spanish, poco y poco. This is so, or tranquila, be calm, or little by little. And it seems like a small thing, but what you're really saying is you're talking about the culture itself. So the culture in Spain, or many parts of Spain, not all, especially southern Spain, is it's okay, calm, little by little. right? Like we're going to get there. It doesn't have to be all at once. It doesn't have to be rushed. So language is a really good way to understand the culture. And I appreciate culture more because I understand language. And even more importantly, I use it all the time. When someone doesn't understand, a tourist was coming in and he didn't understand how to put gas or petrol in the car and he couldn't speak the language. So I spoke to one person in one language and I spoke with him in German. I think it was an older gentleman. When I say older, I think it's his 80s, and explained to him how to use this rental car that he had, but in German. So it really does help to be able to speak another language. Unfortunately, the languages I speak now, I don't speak Arabic or Russian or Chinese or one of the African languages, and I would really like to learn uh, at least an African language and perhaps another language that would allow me to speak with more people, have an
Yeah,
understanding of the culture.
I agree with you. And I think as I continue to grow too, I want to continue to learn more languages. Can you bring us a little bit into your world? What were some of those moments that shaped your life and influenced how you see the world and humanity?
That's such a good question. I think that all of us, including me, have family. Family really shapes your life and shapes your world. So my mother, uh, the former Dr. Margot G. King, was a person that really believed in giving to the community, but also believed in education. And I'm not talking about just in a matter of degrees, but learning and then learning and taking that learning and then passing it on to the family, passing it on with legacy, passing it on to other family members to show them how they can make their lives better or find a better path to where they want to go. So I would say that my mother, as an only child, also my mother was extremely influential for me. And my mother used to teach me French in the bathroom mirror while she was getting her doctorate. Because when she had her doctorate, this was in New York, she was the first person of African American descent to receive a PhD at St. John's University in New York. And during this time, she had to learn French because this is a time when you also had to speak another language in order to do a doctorate. It's not that way now, but it was before, way back when. And so she used to, in the mirror with me in the bathroom, I remember, I won't say teach me speak French words, but literally speak French words to me. And so this was my beginning of understanding other cultures. Also, in our living room, I had the most unusual childhood because in our living room was a very, very big 3D cast of the Parthenon in Greece. I mean, I know that now. I didn't understand what it was then, and it's not one side. It's 3D cast of it, and it was enormous. And waking up at night to go to to go to relieve myself. Let's say that when I was a child, I'd see my mother sitting there with stacks of books, on the table and a brass lamp that was lit. And so these earliest memories of culture and of language and being taken to the theater has really affected my life in loving other cultures. But what she also did, which I think is amazing, is she helped me to learn and love my own culture. Gullah Geechee African American, so we're from the Gullah family, and to understand my heritage. And so that was from the beginning of my life. And in understanding and learning my own heritage and understanding and learning other heritage, even just by having it on the wall or going to theaters or learning to speak French in the mirror or whatever it is, has really shaped me as quote unquote a global person who sees culture and loves it rather than tolerates it.
That's great to hear. And speaking of being a global person, talk to us. I want you to share a little bit about your foundation and a few things that have made you proud that you all have done.
Well, thank you. So I started the foundation back in 2000, and we were able to get our accreditation as a foundation in 2002. This is a time when it took a couple of years to get it done. And when we first started the foundation, it was to work with children and youth internationally all over the world. And more importantly, to make sure that resources that go to children and youth actually make it outside of the city centers to the rural and more the areas where most of them were, rather than all the money going to the city centers. And even more importantly, the foundation was a fully functioning volunteer organization, which means that all donations went directly to programs and not to salaries, not to brick and mortar, and so on and so forth. And we've had it that way now for 22 years. I would say I'm very, very proud of what we've done at Ariel Foundation International, because we are fully run by, and we take our action and impetus from young people. Whatever we do is because a young person wanted to do it. Many people say that they are youth-led, but they're not. We really are. And because we're youth-led, that means that we're always changing, we're always growing, we're never the same. And it also means that we change according to the young people, of what young people need and what young people want. So when it comes to what I'm really proud of, I'm really proud that Ariel Foundation International has special economic and social status with the United Nations. What does that mean? It means that we were the first people in the entire world to ever have young people and children registered as delegates to the Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland, as participants.
Wow.
Not as somebody going, to look, or going as a school group, but literally as participants. And also giving presentations at the United Nations, which they did. And so I think that was 10 years ago, and we're still doing that now. And I'm very proud of that. We're also proud of the fact that young people have so much to give and so much to say. When they do have these events at the United Nations or the European Parliament. We've also had the Senegalese Parliament. We've also done it in the British Parliament. What we really love is that they also commemorate this, and we memorialize it by putting into a publication. So we have over 60 publications that were done by children and youth in many languages. Many languages that many people don't know, like Lithuanian, for example, many African languages that people usually speak but don't read. Right. So, of course, your basic languages that many people think of, the English, Spanish, French, Russian, Chinese. We have publications in that. And what's more important is that these young people, children and youth, actually do the entire publication. They present in their own language, their own thoughts, and these publications go back to the United Nations to actually inform the United Nations what young people truly think about these various issues.
So how'd you all start? Did you start international, or how was the origin of it to get to where you are now?
I think we started internationally only in that we started in Washington, D.C. It actually started, we registered in Houston, within 1 year was in Washington, D.C. But I believe it was always international in one way, because our board of directors were active ambassadors at the time. Many of them are now retired. Our same board of directors are still with us after 15 plus years, I guess 18. Okay, I can't count. But many of them are still with us now. Some unfortunately have passed away. We memorialize them. But we started out with ambassadors and international people that didn't need to earn money in order to work for young people. And they were there, I would say, for the right reasons. And that also helped, because even when we had funding, it would go in and out to be used correctly within 6 months. So we were always transparent, and there was never any difficulty for the sitting ambassadors. So we're talking about ambassadors of countries,
Yeah.
right? So I think we were always international, but we always worked nationally too, because the truth is America is only full of international people.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
So,
Let's get into your book. And speaking of being international, let's start at the basic level. What does the word humanity mean to you?
humanity means to me who you are and what you were born with. All of us were born with humanity. It's a basis of who we are. It's a basis of who we will be, who we become, and it's the basis of who we impart to other people around us. So it's an inherent. It's almost as a spirit, not but like having, people say, oh, that person has this kind of spirit. They have a giving spirit. They have a loving spirit. They have humanity is within all of us. And all of us have this humanity. I don't know if we call it spirit, but this humanity gift that we're born with. We just don't remember.
To draw from Oprah, what do you know for sure about humanity?
I know for sure that we're all born with it, and I know for sure that it's the best of ourselves. When we remember who we are and when we remember our humanity, we are truly remembering who we are as a people, as
Perfect.
a global people all over the world.
Yeah, you mentioned this quote in the book. You talk about humanity before it can be given to someone needs to be possessed. It has to be in the possession of someone first. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit? And how does one champion themselves?
You know, what's really interesting is that when we were all younger, first of all, we're born with humanity. It's not something that you have to acquire, it's already there. So that's why the book is called Humanity Unveiled, because it's there. It's just a matter that it's covered over. So when you look at the fact that humanity is covered over and is part of who we are, you say, well, then what's the big deal? Why is it important? It's important because in today's world, we've learned the language. I know myself, I forgot the language of humanity. What exactly does that mean? What I literally forgot the language of humanity. And I went back and I started to think about what is humanity and what does it mean to me and how did I understand it? And I realized that I understood humanity by what people showed me, by how people treated me, by um, having what people sometimes call time and grace without thinking that I, not just that I didn't deserve it, but without really asking for it. And that's when I started to realize that there's a humanity and a language that I had forgotten. Many of us know the language of violence. We know the language of, artificial intelligence. We know the language of machines. We use them all the time, but we forgot our own language, which we were born with, which is the language of being human. Humanity is the ability to be human. It's all it is, nothing more. But we forgot that, including myself. So when I forgot that, I decided, wow, I really need to remember what is this language of humanity and what does it mean? And how have I seen it in my life? And this is where this book came from and these stories.
Yeah, that's well said. And how do we get back to our humanity? As you see, there's things that go on in the world where it allows you sometimes to become numb to things and you forget
Yes.
these things. Like, how do you continue to draw your humanity to bring you back to even when things are going disarray in the world?
I mean, that's a very good question. And everybody has their own way, right? All of us are individuals and we have our own way of bringing ourselves back to what I call center. Where's your center? Whatever that means for everyone. I personally use nature. I personally use music. Every now and again, for example, when I want to experience joy, I use dance. I'm just smiling because I remember that there are times that I would dance with my mother and I would have the most incredible laugh because there was such joy in dancing, not for anybody, just dancing together. And so I think for all of us is different. For some people, it's being quiet in a place and reading. For some people, it's meditating. For some people, it's praying. Everyone has a different way to get back to their core, to their center, right? Wherever that center is. And what's interesting is that center doesn't have technology. That center doesn't have people telling us who we are. It doesn't have us trying to be like someone else. Because the truth is, humanity also basically necessitates us being us, whether we like it or not, right? It
Mhm.
really gets you back to the core of who you are. And then once you get back to the core of who you are, by yourself, wherever that is, wherever that place is, you realize that all the things that you're trying to aspire to, that everybody says you should be, that you think you should be, actually don't matter as much as um, being civil, as being joy, as having being truthful, as um, um, helping, mentoring others, championing others, these basic parts of being human. And then you realize that these basic parts of being human are more important than what you think you hear and what you think you see and what we're told that we need to be and what we need to have and what we need to buy and so on and so forth. Because the truth is that has nothing to do with humanity.
So, what is on your humanity playlist? As you say, music brings you back to humanity. What are these songs that we should be
Um,
listening to?
oh goodness. Well, now that you say this, there are two songs in the book. And when I was in my 20s, a long, long time ago, I used to write music, play the guitar like Tracy Chapman, but not like Tracy Chapman because I didn't get that kind of money. And I recorded it and would go to Greece and actually play this music. So one song is called How Does It Feel? And I dedicated that song to Dr. Kubler-Ross, who was a person who wrote about death and dying, you know, the 5 stages of death and dying. And I actually met her and spent time with her. And I dedicated that song to her because the times that I met her and I was in her workshop and I was a young 20-something-year-old, the last thing I wanted to do was face any issues. You know, I'm 20. I don't have any issues. I don't want to think about life. I don't want to think about death. I don't want, I'm 20. And she taught me that not only is it okay to look, because when you actually do look, what you're going to find is a joy and a love of life. Right. So that song is How Does It Feel? And I dedicated that song to her. And then the second song is Teach Me to Live One Day at a Time.
Mm.
And that song was dedicated to Dr. Maya Angelou, actually.
Yeah.
And after I met her, and I decided that I wanted to give her back something that she gave me. So the music sometimes that I write allows me to talk about these feelings and these ideas of humanity. What's important? How does it feel? It's important. What do you think? How do you feel? Getting back to yourself and understanding yourself. And once you understand yourself and you allow yourself to be human, it's so much easier to look at others, to be there with others, to help others, to forgive others, to deal with others, right? Once you realize, okay, this is who I am, I got it, I understand. And then it's almost like having a mirror, because once you have that, you can then reflect the humanity and the kindness and the peace that you have for yourself to the other person, whoever
Yes.
that is.
Speaking of that, I do want to get into some of the luminaries because you talked about Dr. Maya Angelou. And as I remember from the book, you gave her that song when you met her, correct? So I would
Yes,
love to talk about different luminaries and just some of the things that stuck out from each person. So can we start with Dr. Maya Angelou and that experience you met with
yes.
meeting her?
Oh, goodness. She is amazing. In Hawaii, Dr. Maya Angelou came to speak at a church. I knew about her because my mother, who went to the City University of New York when she was younger, my age at the time, actually, in her 20s, met her in New York and heard her speak and bought her book. Then that book was set on the shelf in our home. We have lots of books in our home. Books are very important in a home. And one day, as a preteen, I was a very precocious teen. I was reading, my mother's a clinical psychologist with a PhD, so I was reading all of her psychology books by 10 and 11.
And the book
And
was I Know Why the
I know why the
Thing.
cage birds sing.
This
Yeah.
one, yeah.
And unfortunately, I was about 11 or 12, so I was really shocked because I didn't know about many of these things, but it was important. And I remember the color of the book, it was orange, and I remember the bird was black. And just by chance, when I'm in my 20s in Hawaii at the University of Hawaii, I find out that she's actually speaking. I go to see her speak, and I'm engrossed. And it takes a lot to engross me because I get bored very quickly. And for the first time ever, I was still, sitting still for an hour, hour and a half. I don't even know. I never sit still for an hour and a half. But she brought me on a journey of not just speaking, but storytelling, singing. It was all encompassing and all engrossing. It was not a talk. She brought me to her land, right? Dr. Maya Angelou land. And I was so happy to be there because in that land, I mattered. And in that land, I could be seen. And in that land, I could be me. It's very hard to explain, but I can see it in my mind now because I will never forget that. And this is, let me just say I'm older, almost 40 plus years later that I'm remembering this. But anyway, I saw her and I had to go to a class because this is the time where, you book in the class and if you're not there, you get in trouble. So I went back to my class, took my moped, zoomed back to my class, took the class, tried to zoom back again, which was only 10 minutes, but for the reception. When I arrived there, it was done. And she was in the car and she saw me in the moped and she stopped the car. She was in back of the car. And I was so surprised that she stopped. And she put the window down and she said, "Can I help you, baby?" And I said, "No, ma'am, I just want to thank you. You gave me everything I need. I'm so grateful." And she said, "Okay." She put the window up and I thought, okay, that's the last I'm going to see of her. I had a friend and I called up, you know how you have your two people removed from somebody you want to know. So I
Exactly.
called up a friend and I said, I I really want to give Dr. Maya Angelou something because she gave me a gift and I want to give her something back. And they said, okay, they then told me, they called me back and say, okay, go to this address in Waikiki. And I thought, okay, I went to the address. I think I'm just going to bring her my music. And a woman comes down and I think I'm going to give it to her. She says, no, come up with me. So I think I'm going to come up somewhere and give someone this music, right? And I get to the door and it's Dr. Maya Angelou. And she said, come in. But what was so amazing about this encounter is that she took over an hour to sit me down. First of all, she asked me, would you like to sit? It was a hotel suite, but more like a hotel apartment. It's hard to explain, but would you like to sit in the living room? Would you like to sit on the terrace? Well, no, I want to sit on the terrace. I love being outside. So there's just the two of us. The other person stays inside, and she talks to me about my life. What do I want to do? What am I thinking of? How is my life? How's my life going? And all of the time is about me and nothing about her. This is who I am. This is what I've done. Nothing. And at the end of this, I feel really good, but I'm also a little stunned. And she says, is there anything else? And I said to her, how do you keep giving when after you've given everything? And I mean, when she was on the stage, she gave everything. I don't even know how she had the energy to walk off the stage. Right. So I said, how is it that after you give everything and people still want more? How do you deal with that when you literally have given them everything, but they want more from you? Give me a signature, give me this, give me that. That's why I said, no, thank you. Do you want anything, baby? I said, no, thank you. You've given me everything. And she said, kiss. I said, pardon? Keep it simple, sweetie. I said, yes, ma'am. So I don't know what that encounter, to this day, she made me understand that I was important and she gave me time and respect. And she saw me and she said, you are important and my time with you is important. And the fact that I spend time with you asking you, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? And she expected me to pass that along. So that's why I'm really happy that within this book, I passed along the story of her. This is not about me. This is truly about her and the gifts that she gives to people.
Yeah, and it's an incredible story. And even in like reading it in the book, and even when you explain it there and reading into the book, it pops out of her significance and who she was as a person. Let's get into someone else that had an impact on your life as well. Dr. Nina Simone. What was one of the things we talked about was confidence from her. But tell us something you've learned from her in her life journey.
Oh, thank you. By chance meeting, another by chance meeting. I think I was coming back from Switzerland, I believe. And, I was living in Europe, so I was coming back from Switzerland and I had to go to Los Angeles. It was something like that. So it was one of those long flights, one of those like Australia, New York flights. And this was many years ago. But anyway, we got off the flight and we were at the baggage. And this is where you have to go through passport control and you have to go through customs and so on and so forth. So we're at the baggage and I see this dog in a crate and the dog is being let out. And without really thinking about it, I start talking to the dog out loud. I mean, now I'm thinking like, what was I doing? And I just felt so bad for the dog, like 16 hours in the crate. And I was talking to the dog and Dr. Nina Simone was in a wheelchair at the time. And she said to me, that's my dog. And I said, oh, I didn't know who she was. And she said to me, and who are you? Hello, ma'am. My name is Ariel Rosita King. Right. I mean, she was not a wallflower. Right. And she said, my name is Dr. Nina Simone. I said, it's nice to meet you, ma'am. Not understanding the significance of who she is, I'm going to admit, I didn't know who she was. This happens to me a lot. And we started to talk, and she tells me that she lived in France, on the border between France and Switzerland. Many of us do, on the frontier. and that she was coming back to America for the first time to revitalize her career, and that she's lived in France for 20 years or so. I mean, she used to go back, but she literally, and I understand that. And we started to talk about her excitement, but also her trepidation of what was it going to be like to come back to America. Because all of us who live in America as someone who is other than of European descent understand what it's like to go from one country to another and then go back to America and then to try to dip your foot back into this reality that you have to somehow navigate, you know? So, and we started to talk about that. And she started to talk about her neighbor, which I don't think it's recorded anywhere, so I won't talk too much about that. But let's just say she and her neighbor had some disagreements. And it was agreed that she would go back to America for a little bit and restart her career. And that's what she did. And it was really fantastic to meet her and talk with her. And I really love the fact that she wasn't all dolled up, no makeup, you know, and especially for us women, we women are into our hair, whatever we need to do, you know, dye it, but whatever. Hair is like everything, right? More important than makeup. So that her hair wasn't done, it was disheveled. She didn't have any makeup on, but the confidence was absolutely there. There was like, you know, she was there. There was no, she didn't need the hair. She didn't need the makeup. It was already ingrained into who she was, even in the way she sat in the wheelchair. Right? So it was more like a throne, right? Like it
Wow.
wasn't like it was.
That's incredible.
And she gave me her card and she said, "My name is Dr. Nina Simone." And she said, "Please contact me." I tried to contact her later, but of course, as you know, once you have people working with you and you have agents and so on and so forth, they decide who gets to see you and who don't, and who gets to hear you and don't. What's interesting about this story is many years later, let's say 15 plus years, I don't know, because I'm a pretty old person, I'm in France and I learned that her daughter, her only daughter, is going to be singing on the stage. I go, I don't think this is in the book, it could be, but I'm not sure. I go and I see her, she's fantastic. She tells all these stories about her mother. And when she's done, I go and I speak to her and I said, "I met your mother. And I want you to know that not only do I understand these stories, but I'm sure of them." So she's now living in the same mansion that her mother was living in, that the same place. I won't call it a mansion, they don't call it mansion, but the same home,
Mhm.
estate home in France. And she's raising her own daughter.
Wow. That's incredible.
Isn't that amazing? Most
That's a
people don't
great
know
story.
a full circle.
Yeah, it is full circle. That isn't that. That's exceptional. And speaking of that, let's since we're going over the pond, let's go other internationals, people that you've met. Archbishop Desmond Tutu. You talked about
Right.
forgiveness can be tough. How do you approach? Or how did he approach it? Or what did you learn from Archbishop Tutu?
Archbishop Tutu was an incredible man and an incredible presence. How? He was so understated. He made sure that everybody was comfortable around him. You know, you know how sometimes even people that are cleaning feel, oh, I have to, I have to kind of make myself smaller, or um, people who feel that somehow they're not in the same category, somehow the same status. He made sure that people didn't have that. And I met him several times, but the time that really sticks by me is the time that we were on an alumni cruise for a semester at sea. This is a ship that goes around the world to
Mhm.
13 countries, and I did this at 20 years old. That's how I started to travel a lot. And he was there on our alumni cruise. And at the time, I had my current daughter, who's 21, but she was 3. And what really impressed me about him, that it didn't matter if it was Ambassador Ropalaki, who was actually on our board of directors, was also with us. So she's an ambassador. She was ambassador to the Kingdom of Lesotho. The way he engaged Ambassador Ropalaki, who was an ambassador, was the same way he engaged my 3-year-old. And even now, that makes me stop and think, wow, do I do that? Can I treat a 3-year-old the way I would a sitting or an active ambassador? Why do I say that? Because even when we were standing in line for book signings and so on and so forth, my 3-year-old at the time was quite precocious. And I think at that time it had already gone to 10 countries. You know, she learned elephant in Zimbabwe by going on safari.
Wow.
Okay, that's how she learned the word elephant. So she's quite precocious. I think she's three and a half going on 4. And when it was time, she had her book, and when it was time to sign her book, he did the same that he did for everybody else. He said, well, you know, what would you like me to say? Where would you like me to sign it? And I kind of stood back. You know, I didn't feel like I needed to be a part of that interaction. And I thought, oh my goodness, this man is amazing. And then he was actually speaking to everybody, and all the children were invited to go watch a movie. And I said, no, I think it's better for my daughter to stay here. She doesn't need to watch a movie. I think it's better for her to hear a luminary. But she was a typical 3.5-year-old. So she's moving this way and she's moving that way. And she has her foot going up. And I'm dying of embarrassment. Because I'm thinking, people are not happy with me. You know, you have this luminary here and people want to take pictures and they want to see him, you know, in this very straight. And when he was done, my daughter, I mean, I'm really shocked, literally jumped in the air onto him and he caught her. And I thought, whoa. A man that can see the humanity in a child and see the humanity in an ambassador is able to also see the humanity in people that sometimes do things that are inhumane.
Mm.
And that spirit allowed him to have forgiveness.
Yes. And speaking of forgiveness and humanity, let's go into compassion. And one of the people you highlight as a luminary is Pope Francis. What did you learn from Pope Francis in your encounter?
Pope Francis was another unusual, unplanned, amazing encounter. So, with the foundation, I was working with a young man who was walking throughout Europe trying to highlight some of the issues of child sexual abuse that he himself had experienced within his family. And our foundation helped him with, he was taking a caravan and literally walking throughout 28 countries, literally. So it was a 2-year program. And part of this program was meeting ambassadors, meeting country heads, going to the United Nations, which a lot of it I helped to set up since that was the world I usually function in. And we were able to meet the Pope. And when we got an invitation to meet the Pope, I thought that we were going to be one of the 2,000 people. When we arrived there, you know, the people that people see in the Beefeater suit actually showed us to a corridor. We went through the corridor. And when we came out of it, we were shocked because we were literally sitting in the first row. So we were in the first row. The first row was only about 16 seats. The second, third, fourth, and fifth row were people who were married. So couples who had just married that were going to get a blessing from the Pope.
Mm.
And then behind that was about 2,000 people within one of their smaller churches. All right. In the Vatican, in the Vatican in Italy. And what I say for him is that the fact that I'm not, first of all, I'm not Catholic. So I went there, but I didn't go there with the same expectations and the same feelings as a Catholic person would.
Yes.
Okay. And so as a result of that, I didn't really look for or count on any kind of special feeling.
Mm.
I was there. It was important for me to be there. But when I went, I'd also decided that at the time, my youngest daughter, the one who was also with Archbishop Desmond Tutu, was suffering from, she's okay now, but she had blood cancer.
Oh.
And I thought, you know what? If I can go to the Buddhist, I could go to the Christian, I can go to the AME, wherever, to give me prayers. I would like to focus these prayers on this child, to save this child. And I brought the picture with me. And I was the fourth person that he talked to. I mean, out of everybody. So I was shocked once again. Right. And I had the picture and he asked me for the picture, which I thought was very unusual. And he picks up the picture and looks at it. And he asked me who is it, and I said, this is my daughter. And he asked me, you know, what is it? And I tell him. And he says that he'll pray. And the people around him are saying, okay, it's time to move on. And he's like, no. And that really surprised me because, and when I say people, I mean, there's a videographer, a photographer, 5 or 6 bishops around him. And they basically lead him from place to place. And he basically told them, no. And he took my hand and he took the picture and he made a prayer. And I was stunned at his compassion because it was real. It wasn't contrived. It wasn't in his title. It wasn't in all of the pomp and circumstances around us. It wasn't in the people that were with him. In that moment, in those moments, all those people didn't exist. The only person he cared about was me and my daughter and prayers for my daughter.
Wow.
And that for me was just absolutely life-changing.
Thank you for telling these stories of just compassion, because again, we're unveiling humanity. It's there. You just have to see it through these people. And sometimes these stories from people that we admire or have heard about through history bring that humanity to a real centered level. So let's get into the consideration, because you talk about President Nelson Mandela. What was
Yes.
that like, meeting and the interaction there?
So I even have it where I'm sitting now. I have Mandela. All of my life, one way or another, South Africa has been a part of my life. Literally, in New York, we had South Africans move in. The people that would visit them would say, "But you mean you live here? You actually live here?" They were shocked because here I was living as I said, my mother was a doctor, right? And my stepfather was a lawyer, and I was an only child. But these people from South Africa with apartheid have never seen anybody like me live that way. So my life has always been, in one way or another, linked to South Africa. So before I learned about apartheid, I learned about, believe it or not, as a young person in my teens, the love of South Africa, the land, the people. Even when I was in high school reading Cry the Beloved Country by Alan Paton, my view of South Africa was different. So when I was also in a university, we protest for apartheid to get them to divest. So once I finally got to South Africa and I'm working on my PhD, I have a very good friend who's a lawyer friend, just a friend. He's helping to work on the new constitution of South Africa. And we're talking, and he actually asked me. So he said, would you like to go meet President Nelson Mandela? Now, this is before, by the way, he's president, but he's not sworn in yet. So I'm living literally 2 streets away from where he's sworn in Pretoria.
Wow.
And I said, "Oh my goodness, I would love to." Like, really?
Absolutely.
Yes. Oh, yeah. When? I'm there. Tell me. I'll get my stuff ready now. Is it next month? Right? So he plans it. We go together. We fly to Cape Town because it's in Kaapstad, into Cape Town. And we get there. And when we get there, there was an emergency meeting called at, I think, the parliament. There was something going on because remember, they're writing and they are looking at and trying to vote into a new constitution. So they're literally making and developing a country. While I am there, his brother, they call him Kit, and Kit Varta, I hope I'm saying his name right, who is a person of Indian descent that was actually part of the whole group that went to prison with Nelson Mandela. Basically, like his brother decided that, okay, you're in good hands, he'll take care of you. And I sat there with him talking story, and he would tell me the stories about him and President Nelson Mandela and how they basically grew up together and how he felt that other people within the movement were really more like his family. And we waited for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then I was told, "I'm really sorry, but there was a message that he won't be able to make the appointment, and he's sorry, but he'll make another appointment." I was disappointed, but not really, because I got to go into the president's office, and I also was able to speak with a person that was with Nelson Mandela the entire time. And he himself is an icon, which I didn't know at the time, once again. But just from his story, he's an amazing person. I go back to Pretoria, and my very good friend who is a lawyer, who's working for the Constitution, building the Constitution, writing the Constitution, constitutional lawyer, comes back with a signed picture. Dear Rosita, my mother calls me Rosita King, best wishes, Mandiba. And I'm shocked because I'm thinking, I was just an appointment in a book.
Right.
You don't know me. I'm not the daughter of anybody important. I'm not related to anybody important. I myself am not important. But let me understand this. You were building a country, so you couldn't have an appointment with me and you feel bad about that? Or you feel somehow that you owe me something? So you sign a photo with my name on it and give it to the lawyer to bring back to me and say that you're going to make another appointment with me?
Wow.
Pardon? I didn't get to see President Nelson Mandela, but I got to feel the gifts of President Nelson Mandela. And it's not just because he signed a photo, it's because he thought of me, he remembered me, he considered me, he considered me important enough to do it. I have to tell you what's strange about this photo. I've never seen this photo before until I went to the Smithsonian last year. I went on a vacation to Washington, D.C. to see all the sites. And I went to the Smithsonian, and there was that picture, the same picture that I had that he
Wow.
signed. And I thought, I know that picture. And I felt better because then I say, this was a legitimate picture. I know that picture. So within the book is the signed picture that he made for me and also that picture. So with these stories are also some things that show that these people really are real, either photos with them or things with them to show, no, this really did happen. Not a
Yes.
figment of my imagination, but these blessings did occur.
Yeah, I still need to read A Long Walk to Freedom, but I really enjoy. Thank you just so much for telling that story because I'm always interested in learning about that era of South Africa and just the stories that you're telling really bring these moments to life. I want to end with one person that a lot of us may not know, but you did write a very incredible story. I think you even call him your uncle, but Mr. is
Yeah.
it Caton or Caton? I want to make sure I get
Yes.
it right. Please tell his story.
Oh,
I thought it was
thank
incredible,
you.
just the whole thing. So for us that are not familiar, please tell his story as well. I thought it was a great
Okay,
story.
great. So my uncle Lauderic Rex Caton, I met in England while I was a PhD student at the University of London. I was at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And I don't know why I do some of the things I do, they just happen, but I decided that the building next to me had 3 floors of older people. And I love older people and I love young people. And I decided to give them a mug with my card to say, if there's anything that I can do to be of service or help you, I'm here as a neighbor. And Uncle Logic said, I call him Uncle Logic Rex Caton, said he looked at the card and said, who's this woman behind all of these letters of these degrees? Because he was an intellectual. And I got to know him. What's really interesting is when I got to know him, I didn't know who he was. I had no idea that he has changed history for everybody in the entire world. I had no idea. And for him, it wasn't important. Um, so my uncle Lodrick was somebody who I got to know and love within several years. He was basically a neighbor. And we would have barbecues together. I would help him sometimes go to the doctor, so on and so forth. And only much later did I learn that he was the first person literally in the world to electrify the guitar. So what happened that people don't know about it? Well, actually, he's in Mojo magazine. Neil Young is actually on the cover of Mojo magazine. So they talked about, it says, I've created a monster. So he told me the story behind it. So people think, oh, wow, you created it for rock and roll. No, he said that in the 1940s, right? He started from 1938. He bought his guitar in 1938, the original guitar. And he said that when he used to play in bands, he was the first one to get fired
Mhm.
because nobody could hear him. And he was not happy with that. But my uncle Logic was an incredible genius. He did Sanskrit. Even in his last days, literally in the hospital, he was doing mathematical equations I didn't understand.
Wow.
Right, at 88. And so what he did is he worked in electronics, and what he did is he put together the first quote unquote speaker to use in order to amplify the sound of the guitar. And when he did that so he wouldn't be fired. He didn't do that to change the world. He did that because it was out of necessity, and he was basically a genius. And he worked, and he was known by many people for playing the guitar, and he was also known for teaching people the guitar. He went all over the world. He even had some run-ins with Hitler at the time, believe it or not, and had to leave. And what many people don't know about him, they always thought that he was a hermit, but he wasn't a hermit. What people didn't know about him and understand about him is that he was married
Mhm.
and he was dedicated to his wife. And his wife was, they didn't have children yet, and his wife was not happy that many musicians go on boats and they have to travel to work. And the life of a musician is difficult because you go where you're paid and you go as you're paid. And he actually passed away being married. Most people don't know, and I only learned later. But people said that he was a hermit. They made up stories about him being a hermit and not liking people. And it just wasn't true. He just didn't suffer fools. He didn't like gossip. He wasn't someone who believed that he had to somehow show off who he was or all of his writings. He wrote a lot of music. And now, believe it or not, that music is being played after he passed away, unfortunately. Um, but my uncle Lauderic also wrote 3 books. And he actually asked me to have one book given to Spike Lee, so I'm still going to do that. He said, "You have to give this to Spike Lee." I said, "Yes, Uncle Logic, I promise." So you're all hearing me say it now. I'm going to be sending it to Sir Spike Lee. This is from Uncle Logic Caton from Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm going to be sending you his book. One is called Viola, and the other is called Transpositions. So
Wow.
he was also a writer at a time when you used the computer and the typewriter. So he was just an amazing gentleman. I think what I really learned about Uncle Lodrick is that he was uniquely himself,
Mm.
and he really did have a true dedication of people, and he really did love people. With all of my cousins, you have him kissing them, and he'd be buying them things and doing and always asking about them. And um, with young people from the University of London, we had people from all over the world. He was always with us. I have pictures in the book of him with some people that we have, some of my friends from Japan, because he was just always a people person. So I always wanted to also tell his real story of who he was rather than who people would like to see him as, a moody musician who's a hermit. No, no. He was a man who loved people, who was a genius, who was dedicated to his wife. So he went back to the apartment waiting for her to come back.
Wow.
And I'd like to write that book because I have all the letters that he has and all the letters he wrote to her and all the letters she wrote to him. And it's a love story. And I'd like people to know him for who he is, not who people make him up to be.
Yes, please write the story. And just as you said, the impact of his life is still felt today from everything that we see when it comes to music. So again, thank you for all of these stories and these luminaries that have brought life to this world. I want to go back to you yourself to hear this one question answered. What does living a full, meaningful life look like for you after all these experiences that you've experienced now?
Oh, wow. A full, meaningful life for me goes full circle. It means having children and young people and helping them figure out where their humanity is, helping, if not helping, allowing people to find their own humanity, their own stories within their lives of humanities, and to get the language back. The language of humanity is so important for us, especially now when we're talking about machines acting like people. They can never act like people because machines are machines and people are human. Machines could never be human, never. So it's so important. We would talk, oh, how about the jobs of the future? Oh, there aren't going to be these jobs because we have machines. Right. So then what do we have that they don't have? We have our humanity. You cannot give machines humanity. We are born with it, and it's something that you can never, ever, ever give to a machine. And it's the one area that's going to allow us to thrive and to bring the world forward, right? Don't worry about not working in certain jobs. You don't need that. All you need is you and an understanding of who you are and the language of humanity and your story. Every single person has a story of humanity.
Well said. I would like to now switch to your writing because there's nothing else I could say there that would add anything of value. But let's talk about your writing. What was your writing schedule like for writing this book?
Thank you. Well, I had my expectations were not correct. I had decided that I had 3 months and I was going to write everything in 3 months. And what I did is I sat with another person and I told the story because I had decided for me what's really important was to tell a story, to take what I had in my head and empty it. And then I realized that even though I told these stories, I didn't understand. I understood that they showed me humanity, but I didn't understand the language, as I just said to you. So I had to say, what is this? Humanity is joy.
Mm.
Humanity is competence. Humanity is legacy. Humanity is civility. But I didn't understand the language. I forgot the language. So through these stories, I then had to remember, what does this mean? What does this story tell me? What part of humanity is it showing me? So then I realized that this wasn't just about writing a book. This was teaching myself the language again. I know many languages, but I forgot the language of humanity.
Yeah, I like that. Well said.
So as a result, the 3 months was not 3 months, it was 6 months. After 6 months, I also had to say, but wait a minute, but where do these stories fit in? And then I realized, wait a minute, for me in my life, I always look at the Hillel. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Second, if I am only for myself, what am I? The third is, if not now, then when? And I had decided, as I usually do, something was missing for me. And that was, if not me, then who? And then all of a sudden, these stories made sense because I was able to fill these stories into those 4 categories. And that allowed me to understand not just my life, but life in general and how humanity brings so much into our lives through the language of humanity. We learn the language of machines. We learn the language of violence. We learn the language of war. Why shouldn't we learn the language of humanity again? Why shouldn't we not remember the language of humanity? We know every other language.
How'd you decide who to put into the story? Because I'm sure you had other stories of people that you've met throughout time. How'd you decide, okay, I'm writing about this one when it comes into those 4 frames you were talking about?
Right. I could have added another 4 or 5, or maybe even 6, a lot more. Um, but I had also decided that sometimes you just need to write it rather, because it can always be more. And as someone who's done 2 PhDs, so I've done books before, and I used to be a perfectionist, but now I don't go perfection anymore because I realize that as a human being, thank God I'm human, which means I don't have to go for perfection. The machines can go for perfection, go for it, but I don't need to do that. As a result of that, I said to myself, let's start where we are now. And I decided 19 stories. I think there are 19 stories, 20 is good. There are more, but even now I want to still understand and learn the language by heart of humanity, because even after writing this book, I know some of it, but I don't know the language by heart, right? Like humanity is joy.
Yep.
What is joy? What does that mean? How does it feel? How does it translate? What does that bring for you?
And then how was your writing process, or what are your best tips for writing a story?
I think that it depends on what kind of person you are. If you're an audio person listening, or if you're somebody who likes to read, I think that everybody has their own processes. But for me, telling a story was really important. So using my voice, hearing myself tell it, recording it, and then using transcription, but not using that as a story, but using that as a basis for understanding what the story is. That's the process, because for me, I remember everything that I hear.
Mhm.
And also visually, sometimes I have, not always, but like a photographic memory. So then I'll remember, okay, this is where I said this, and so everybody has their own process. So I think the person has to figure out what is the best way that they like information. What's the best way that they can uh, process information. And the best way they process information, in my opinion, is the best way to write the book. And remember, with today's technology, you don't necessarily have to physically write the book, although some people say it's better. I personally don't write the book first because I get into my intellect more than my humanity and my feelings and my understanding, especially since I wrote 2 PhDs. So I purposely didn't do that because I get into explaining, humanity is this because I don't want to explain because everybody has their own view of what humanity is. I don't want to say what the lesson is because everybody gets their own view of what the lesson is from the story.
Mm.
So that's why I personally didn't pick up pen and write. I did it another way. So then I can tap into the other part of my psyche, which has nothing to do with the intellectualizing of humanity.
Wonderful. The way we like to end this podcast, we usually ask what should be in a founder's toolkit or what should be in an author's toolkit. But today I would love to ask what should be in a humanitarian's toolkit.
Your favorite songs that actually make you feel good about yourself and feel good about the world, whatever that is.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. King, so much. Everybody make sure to pick up her new book, Humanity Unveiled. Please let us know where to find you on the internet or how we can support you.
Thank you. You can, we have a foundation, www.arielfoundation.org, ARIELFOUNDATION.org, or drkingsolutions.com. And very, very happy to talk to anybody, and also wonderful if you can get the book and tell me what you think.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Dr. King. It was a pleasure, and have a great
Thank
rest of your
you.
day.
Gracias. Merci.